Welcome to Year of Connection, a year-long journey toward becoming whole self-connected. I'm your host, Pauline Shu. Last week, we touched on how empathy can bridge divides. This week, we'll talk about bridge connections, what it means to be a person's bridge, and what it means when someone is acting as yours. There's a natural ebb and flow to connections in life. Our best friends when we were young children don't always stay our best friends as adults. We might feel very close to a particular teacher or mentor at times when we are most in need of their guidance, only to drift apart as we mature further. That is not always the case, of course. Plenty of friendships last a lifetime. Many mentorships remain quite close even after both parties move on to different projects. But what I'm getting at is that connections that might seem like, and in fact be, core connections at one stage in our life might not be so in others. And that is exactly as it's supposed to be. We change throughout our lives. We learn, we grow, and we adapt over time, evolving into the person we are meant to become. And in some instances, that evolution both fosters and benefits from different types of connections over its natural meandering course. But our journey through and toward whole self-connection sometimes requires a temporary core connection in which multiple core values are shared, but with whom we are connected through only one or maybe two external interests. And these are bridge connections. What do I mean by that? I'll share a story of a connection in my life that was the inspiration for this episode. A connection whose slow distancing had me at first questioning why my friend and I had drifted apart when we seemed to be so well matched in our core beliefs. A few years ago, I met a woman through a mutual contact. The only reason we both knew this mutual contact was because of our respective careers, which happened to be in the same profession. We were part of a group working to advance in our jobs, and she was someone with whom I formed a very close bond over the next couple of years as we moved through the working world. She is a match with me on almost all of my core values, and our friendship was quite strong for a long time. So I was baffled at first when I realized that we were growing apart. Talking every day turned into every other day, which turned into a week, and so on. I couldn't understand why we weren't as close anymore. Nothing bad had happened. We weren't angry with one another. We still very much enjoyed chatting when we did talk. And I didn't, and still don't, feel as though I could not call her or email her at any time, just to say hello and see what she's up to. What I finally realized after an entire month had gone by, during which we didn't communicate at all, was that our friendship had been based on only one external thing in common: our professions. Despite how many core values we share, our lifestyles are very different. From the type of clothes we wear and food we eat to the number of kids we have and the movies we like to watch, she's a night owl, I'm an early riser, we had almost nothing else in common. Once I realized that, it made perfect sense. Because when our career paths began to diverge, the one external thing that tied us together was no longer relevant, and we began to grow apart. This does not mean I no longer consider her a friend. It does not mean that I no longer believe we share the same core values. I absolutely do still consider her a friend, and I would actually say she's still a good friend because of those shared core values. We both put a lot of investment into our connection, even if we're not now as close as we used to be. We shared a great many experiences that, while they are now memories, they still bind us together in a unique way. Our closeness was worthwhile. It was fun, and our friendship was and still is meaningful. And our relationship is also a bridge connection. When we were closer, our friendship helped us on the journey as we crossed from one side in our careers to another. And when we got to the other side and our professional paths diverged, There was no more external reason to hold us as tightly together, and that's okay. That's a valid and important type of connection. I think it is important to name this particular type of connection too, because we often mistake these for deep and abiding friendship based not only on shared core values, but on multiple external points and shared interests. And when these bridge connections naturally fade, it can sometimes leave us upset and angry if we don't understand the truth of what the connection was and what purpose it served. These connections don't show up only in the way I described either. Bridge connections can be formed for reasons like I talked about in my experience, but they can also be formed to overcome difficult or stressful times. The death of a loved one, for example, might bring many people together who wish to provide comfort to the bereaved. But the new connections that come about for the single external reason of getting someone through grief might all be bridge connections in the end. Bridge connections also might be one-sided instead of shared. In fact, in the example I just gave, often the bereaved is the person who must cross the bridge from impassable grief to get to a place of coping and healing. And those who carry her along may or may not need to cross the same bridge. In cases like these, though, I would advise everyone to keep the possibility of bridge connections in mind, to remember that they are necessary at times and also necessarily temporary. This is important because when bridge connections are one-sided, the gradual or even abrupt fading of these connections can be quite challenging for the one who is being helped across that bridge. For someone who is being helped, understanding that some connections must fade is important to keep from despairing of the loss of the connection. For the helper, it is critical to be honest, to take care with someone you're helping, and to help for the right reason, which is not to find some kind of personal value through someone else's suffering, but rather to guide a friend across a bridge. More often than not, though, a bridge connection will end naturally, without any great drama. Ill-fitting or toxic connections might also fade in a way that feels uneventful, but the difference between these two is that the first, regardless of its short lifespan, can still be considered a core connection, while the latter is not. A final thought. After hearing this episode, if you come to the realization that someone is being your bridge right now, or if you can identify bridge connections in your past that you hadn't necessarily realized were helping you on your journey, take a moment in your thoughts to acknowledge that person for the support they gave you. They helped you cross over from the person you were to who you are now, exactly where you need to be. And gratitude, even in the quiet of your own mind, supports all positive connections, no matter what type they are. Do you have any thoughts on bridge connections that you'd like to share? Feel free to leave a comment on this show's post or send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. In the meantime, I wish you safe travels.